What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Unqualified Film Bros podcast. You just got me and George tonight. Sorry, no Ben, but we are going to be talking about a Pixar sequel, Inside Out 2. It's about almost a decade, right, George?
9 years.
Last time, yeah, 9 years, almost, yeah. Since the first one, this is a pretty much a direct sequel. It's a couple of years later into Riley's life, as she delves into puberty. It's definitely it's a movie. It is. But I want to hear your thoughts, George. What you like? What do you like about it? What didn't you like? What's
Well,
going
I'm
on?
gonna I'm gonna first start off with a statement that I'm gonna read from Mr. Ben Green.
Uh-oh.
He wished for his words to be read from our podcast group chat. Uh, it's an enjoyable enough movie, LOL. So, with those kind words from Benjamin about Inside Out 2, my thoughts. Um, yeah, it's a movie. I think there was a time in my life when, in our lives, because we're same age-ish, where every movie Pixar put out was a banger,
Yeah,
right? They went on a
it
run from basically the beginning until maybe 10 years ago, where every single movie that they put out was Oscar nominee for best animated feature. Like the artistry would be gorgeous, the story would tug at your heartstrings, it would be fun, it would be funny. And Pixar's had some ups and downs in recent years. They've had a lot of good, a lot of bad.
mhm.
Inside Out 2 is very middle of the road, and that's kind of how I felt about the original. For each film, I've gone 3 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. I think while the first one has the originality of the idea of, oh, these different little characters going on in your mind, this one, yes, it does add the new emotions, anxiety, embarrassment, ennui, envy, uh, but it doesn't necessarily take the 5 characters that we had in the first film and bring them anywhere new. And I think while it may have been deliberate to sort of say that these emotions will always be these emotions, from a narrative standpoint, from a character standpoint, filmmaking wise, you want to see a little bit more growth. And with Riley aging up a couple of years, you'd think that her joy, her anger, her fear, her disgust, and her sadness are all a little bit more mature with her. And instead, what they do is they bring in the new emotions and sort of show the inner battle that goes on in Riley's mind throughout the entire 95 minutes of the film. So, from a world building perspective, I think this film is okay. It's gorgeous, as the first film was. Really, really
Mhm.
pleasing to look at. The voice cast, I wanted more from Maya Hawke as Anxiety, and we can get into the cast a little bit more in a second. Iowa Debris, man, she's she's killing it.
She's a star.
Everything she does, every single project that I have seen her in, she's absolute box office, and that continues here. So all of my applause and my praise to Iowa Debris. And the original 5, I mean, they didn't bring back
Bill
the
Hader
voices
or
of,
Mindy Kaling.
yeah, Fear and Disgust. I think Tony Hale picked up uh Fear for this one, and I don't know who was Disgust.
Mhm.
But honestly, I've only seen the original film once. I've only seen this one once. I didn't really notice anything lost there.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think it was a fine enough Pixar film, far from where Pixar has been in both
mhm.
directions.
It's one of their better, more recent films. I think they've come out with some really, really middling films. I think this was near the top of their sort of most recent films, right? They had Wish come out last year, I think.
Wish
That was a
was that Pixar or was
no,
that Disney Animation?
don't know.
That might have
Might
been
have
in
been
the
Disney
like
animation, actually.
I think that was
I
with like
might have
Encanto and Strange
Encanto.
World and
Yeah,
like Frozen, Tangled, those movies.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
Pixar's most recent before this was Turning Red. Wouldn't that
mm.
be right? I'm
Okay,
looking this up.
Turn Red.
I should have prepared this better.
Maybe it was and Luca. They had Luca too.
Pixar films. Trusty old
Raya and the
Wikipedia.
Last Dragon. Onward. Yeah,
Elemental
like
was their last film, and before that,
oh
Lightyear.
oh. Well, Elemental, I highly enjoyed. Thought it was
I
very
loved
cute.
Elemental. It was
Loved
so
it.
cute. It
Yeah.
was so fun.
Speaking of cute, I think what this one does do really well, and I think it is cute, right? I think they do handle sort of the expansion of Riley's mind and emotions and sort of her dealing with the emotions. I think it's creative in the way that they do it, right? I'm thinking especially towards the end of the film, which we'll get to in a second, but the way that they portray anxiety kind of as this tornado that is frantic and never stops, I think is it was done really beautifully, right? Because it you felt the franticness in Maya Hawke's voice and in the character design, but you also sort of get that there is like this sort of incessant need. You get it, you feel it, and I think it's done really well, right? That it is this poison that the anxiety is this poison that takes a deep root in who you are and can create sort of a new person, essentially.
And they do a really good job of presenting that. And I love your phrasing there, to take root,
Mhm,
because that's essentially what we get with this, not necessarily a tree, but Riley's
yeah.
sense of self, the new orange, crackly, sort of angular sense of
Hmm.
self that replaces the more uh, globular, more flower petal shaped sense that we see at the beginning and the end of the film. And I think, yeah, I mean, speaking as someone who has dealt with anxiety in my life, it can be really, really crippling, and it can feel like a tornado is bearing down on everything and crushing you into this sense of everything's going to go wrong. And really, just what we see in the characters with Joy, especially, is sort of a really, really nice approach to handling anxiety. Uh, Less so in the climax of the film, because that's really about helping Riley in that moment lock in a sense of self. But at the very end of the film, when anxiety is sort of stressing over the beginning of the new school year and the beginning of going on to this new team,
Hmm.
we see Joy sort of guide her over to this sort of peaceful little area she's built for herself in headquarters, sipping on anxiety, which is awesome. Really, really nice wordplay. There's a lot of really fun wordplay in this movie, as
Hmm.
there was in the first one.
Yep.
And sort of not necessarily telling her that, the way you're feeling right now isn't valid, which is don't ever don't ever talk to anyone dealing with anxiety with that approach. That's
Yeah.
bad, and you should not do that. But more of a gentler, like, uh, we can't control this, but what can we control?
Hmm.
And let's take smaller bites of everything that's going on and approach things logically one at a time, where
Hmm.
we're not thinking the world's going to end over the beginning of the hockey season or the beginning of the school year. We're going to say, all right, Riley's got a Spanish test. We're going to take off one manageable chunk of everything on the plate, and we're going to tackle it head on together, which I think was a really, really nice way of showing how not necessarily emotions in one's own head, but a support system around a person dealing with anxiety can help get them through a difficult situation like that where they're feeling really anxious and they feel like the world's collapsing around them.
And where I really think this film and even the first one excels at, is of course we know that Riley's going to be okay, right? at least to some degree. She's not gonna, suffer for the entire movie, and she's not gonna end in some, depressed state, right? That would not be a Pixar movie. Um,
Right. And I
but
think we show her
but
in each movie, we show her getting into that in the middle of the film, second act, where
mhm,
her emotions are out of whack. That's a
yeah.
horrible way of phrasing it, and I apologize
But
for that.
what they really show, and what they do really, really well in both films, is show the importance of balance with
Mhm.
these emotions. Even if it's like such a simple concept of like, yeah, of course, everybody needs to have balanced emotions, but I think that's where I love the creativity of these two films is the visualization of emotions that we can internalize and feel in ourselves and in our hearts and in our minds, but seeing them act out and act as their own characters, it sort of gives them the nuance that you wouldn't get if you just were told that there are these emotions living in Riley's head and we were outside of Riley's body and following her in the real world, right? It gives for me, it gives the director and the screenwriter the ability to sort of explain and give these characters the emotions backgrounds without having to explain a lot of it, because you see it through Riley as well, but the growth is the emotions themselves that sort of project onto Riley. Like that's what we're seeing, like, and that's why when they're at the console and the home board, it's like a TV screen, it's like a projector, they're projecting themselves onto Riley, but
Yeah.
they're also Riley in the same vein. So, I appreciate that level of detail. And it's a tricky balance, I think, to get that right. And, it goes back and forth between getting it right, but when they get it right, they get it right.
Yeah, and just building on that, the what we see in from what I remember in the first film a little bit, and then in this film a lot, especially among the five emotions that we saw in the first film, is yeah, they've been, working together in headquarters for Riley's entire life,
7 years,
13
8
years at
years,
this
yeah.
point.
Yeah, now 13.
But and I don't think this is necessarily these emotions rubbing off on each other, but we see anger in joy when she gets overwhelmed trying to come up with a plan and can and she
Yeah,
lashes out at the other three that she's with. We see some sense of bravery and sadness when she and embarrassment are sort of teaming up to take things down from the inside. We see even joy in like fear, disgust, and anger when they accomplish their goal. Like these are simple emotions, as they say in the beginning of the film. Riley needs more complex emotions, I think is anxiety's line as she's kicking the original five out the door. But these emotions of joy, anger, fear, disgust, and sadness have layers of complexity that I don't think we saw in the first film, where we
right.
can really explore the depth that these feelings that we get can have, right? They can take on a sort of deeper, more complex setting in the self where joy is not always pure joy, sadness is not always pure sadness. There are layers and complexities that change depending on the situation, depending on what you're dealing with, depending on how you've approached previous situations like that.
Yeah.
And with maturity comes these new components of emotion. So while all these new emotions are joining the cast, as it were, we're also getting more significant, not significant, more well-rounded emotions, more thorough emotions from the five that we saw in the first film.
Yeah, and to your earlier point about maybe not seeing enough development from the original five emotions, I'd push back on that because I
I think
think,
I just ended up pushing back on it too.
yeah, I think you did too. Because the obviously, the point of the first film is that there's anger and sadness, that there's joy and sadness, there's sadness and fear. That all of these are interconnected and that they have to support each other, right? It's not just Riley that needs a support system. It's her own mind, her emotions that make up who she is. They need support too. And they weren't getting support because they were all compartmentalized in the first movie. And then, there's kind of running smooth in the second movie, and then puberty hits, hormones, like all that stuff is gonna throw everything into an imbalance. And then that's where you come in with the new characters, new emotions. And I think, again, they're supposed to be overwhelming. I think they're supposed to be a little bit more nebulous than just anger or sadness. They're gonna come in more complex. They're gonna come in more prepared, or at least, yeah, prepared to deal with the original five emotions, and the original five emotions are able to deal with the new ones, right? Like these, like anxiety, embarrassment, ennui, they all have elements of the original five in them. And they're now at this point clashing together, and it's Riley's mind and it's her own body fighting against her.
Yeah, I love what you say there about how these new emotions have traces of the other five in them. There's a great line from Fear about anxiety after they're kicked out, talking
Mm,
about, yeah, I can fix her. Because fear and anxiety, while different emotions, are very, very similar.
mhm,
Fear is about the things you see, anxiety is about the things you can't. Fear is in the
mhm.
moment, anxiety is the dread.
Yep.
To put it very, very almost layman's terms simply.
Mhm.
Um, but disgust and ennui are kind of similar. Um, Joy is kind of her own thing. Um,
I think Joy
there's a lot
actually,
of,
she takes up all of them, with the exception of embarrassment.
but still,
I
embarrassment
don't
and
think.
sadness have a lot of similarity. And
Hmm.
sadness and envy have a lot of similarity. Where,
But Joy, I think, is so fascinating in that sense because she is the one that captures all of them. She has all of those emotions in her. She has ennui, she has sadness, she has jealousy, she has anxiety. Like, look at how neurotic she is in both films at trying to protect Riley, like get our girl, right? She lets go of the reins in the second film, sure. That was the lesson she learned in the first one, but it's still going to be there. And it just shows, and I think that's beautiful, is that these two films across sort of their, what, 5 years in Riley's life period, demonstrate that these emotions are far more complex and how quickly it can happen. It's not just them being happy all the time. Like there's so many layers and so many complexities in there.
yeah, I don't know if when Pixar started out with feature films almost 30 years ago with Toy Story, they knew that they were going to be getting into this level of thematic commentary on the human condition.
Hmm.
But I mean, I would recommend these films to probably mostly parents of kids at the
Yeah.
ages that Riley is
Yeah.
uh, in the first one and the second film, just because, speaking from my own experience as an anxious preteen and early teen, um, it can be helpful to have, I'm grateful to my parents for being understanding and helpful of, you know, everything that I needed uh, in terms of dealing with anxiety and mental health in those early teenage years. Because having that support system like Riley has with these two exceptionally caring parents and her two best friends and her new teammates, Riley's going to be just fine. Like we know that, speaking as a movie, we know that going in. Like you said 15 minutes ago, Riley's going to be fine. This wouldn't be a Pixar movie if she weren't. But like speaking within the narrative, looking at everything going on, not only inside Riley's head, But outside, right, everything we see at hockey camp in this movie, everything we see surface level, and yes, everything going on inside has a huge component on what the next step is
Yep.
for her. But just looking at Riley's life, she's going to be okay. And I think, parents understanding what's going on in their kids' heads can, learn something from this movie. But also, kids watching it, it's not just an animated movie with funny, little felt glowing characters uh, animated inside the mind. It's also, you know, perhaps simpler than a commentary on the human condition. It's also sort of a guiding way of breaking down what you're feeling.
It is, and into digestible pieces, I think, for the kids, right? And I
Yeah.
think even showing the perspective of the parents' minds too, because you
We
think
should have
about what
gotten
they're
more of that.
like, what you think about what they're looking like outside of when you just see the parents, not the emotions inside the parents' minds, but just the parents themselves. It is sort of a constant state of confusion, and kind of not quite knowing what to do. And yet, when you go inside, every time we see the emotions of the parents, it's them trying to figure something out. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But you see the mind working, and it shows, at least to some kids that maybe are a little bit older, that their parents are going through some stuff too. That this isn't going to stop necessarily, but this is how you talk about it. This is how you process things. This is how you are able to become who you are. It's these emotions make you who you are. Let them help you. Like, let them support you. Let yourself feel it. And I think that's something across these two movies that is consistent, consistent, consistent. Is that the message is feel what you feel and don't apologize for it, because when you have parents and you have a support system and you have hockey, you have your friends, when you have that stuff, you have a support system, you're gonna be okay. And if they had portrayed Riley as someone who got kicked off the team or something, or something happened to a parent or whatever, right? Then that's a whole nother level of complexity. But that's not the point. That's what makes it a kids movie. This is a kids movie because they want to show you what it's like to have people that love you no matter what, but that they're also just as confused and scared and afraid as you are, and that it's okay. Feel it.
Yeah, I think as much as it's played for a laugh in the film, when embarrassment wraps up our original five cast members and puts them in a bottle and then brings them down to the safe, and Fear goes, "We're suppressed emotions." Yeah, Tony Hale's delivery is really funny. It's it's played for a laugh, but also it's a very real conversation of, well, this is something that doesn't need to happen in your life. Like, yeah, it
Mhm.
was essential to the plot to have the characters end up in the safe and dealing with Pouchy and all of that. But suppressing emotions is, I think, less so the message of this film, but more the message I want to send out there. It's unhealthy. It's not good for you to suppress your emotions, to bottle things up. Like Max just said, feel how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, and you
Don't
see it
apologize for it.
in the middle of the film, right? Is how chaotic things can get when not everything is all there. How distressing it can be. And we're just inside Riley's mind, right? We get more outside of her mind than in the first film in this one, but
Much more, yeah.
much more. And I think that works. And I liked that change. I think it was more important to show the context behind some of like what was going on, because otherwise we have no
Absolutely.
idea. Yeah. And it added new depth.
Yeah,
Because
and
see her interacting, and you see her interacting with these emotions inside her head, but it's her doing it and not the emotions sort of dictating or pushing it. You see how that affects her real life and see how you can really see how it deteriorates relationships.
Yeah, and just the idea of getting more complex through maturity in this film, the film is also more complex than the first one because the first film, we're meeting joy and sadness and anger and disgust and fear all at once, and we don't know these characters, so we have to see their story. And yes, Riley is the, I don't want to say framing device, but Riley is the context for which these characters can move forward in their story. In this film, we know Riley, we know her parents, we know these five key emotions here, and that sets us up where we don't need their story to be 85-90% of the film. What we see in Riley's mind, I would say, is probably about 70% of the movie, maybe 75. But Riley's interactions with her parents, with her friends, with her teammates, with her coach, that's a sizable amount of the movie. And the departure from the first film, one, is a great, great choice by the writer and the director. And two, just allows us to sort of peek under the hood and see. I hate that I just phrased it that way, but peek under the hood and really see how things have changed with expanded context. We can look deeper because we don't need all of the background. We don't need the exposition that we had in the first film.
Yeah. And it works. It absolutely does, in that respect. I mean, I think some of where it misses is kind of, where we don't really get that sense of dread from Riley, that might have been,
Penalty
but
box?
I don't, yeah, but again, that's the climax,
That's a
right? That's
tornado,
the
yeah.
right. That's the end of the movie. But you do get the build up, but it's more cringy than sort of like clearly. But I think that's also a really accurate representation of what it can look like. That it doesn't always look the same for everybody. Um, and it's really that part, I mean, it was good. I like that. Um, what did you think about the color and the sort of the character design of the new emotions compared to the original ones?
Oh, that's a great question, and I want to hear your answers too. Um, we have four new emotions. I want to start with my favorite, Envy, just because it's Iowa Debris and I adore her. She's small. She's got big eyes. She's kind of greenish, which green with envy. But obviously disgust is already green, so we couldn't do fully green. So we did sort of like a teal blue green.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, maybe it's just the way that the our vocal performer delivered this performance. But she's everything about envy. She's idolizing everything done by everyone around her and idolizing everything done by everyone around Riley. And I think it's a really, really well written character.
Specifically
Embarrassment.
anxiety,
What?
specifically
Yeah,
following anxiety. Yeah.
yeah, doing whatever anxiety says
Because
because she
think
wants
about
to be
that, like that
liked.
tracks too,
Yeah,
right? Because anxiety is, or envy is part of anxiety, right?
wanting to fit in, wanting to be cool, wanting to be seen, wanting things to go right so that you get all of those things. Which kind of you can talk about playing into like ambition there too, but maybe we'll get into that in the threequel. Um, Embarrassment, sort of big and lumbering, which embarrassment can really feel big and lumbering
Mhm.
when you're embarrassed. And I think unsure of himself, sort of awkward, bumbling, which, complemented with the shyness makes for, I would say, a decent representation of embarrassment. Certainly couples very nicely with how they portray sadness. I think those two characters together, pairing those two characters together was a really, really strong choice. Um, Ennui, probably the least seen of the four new emotions. She stays off to the side. She's on her phone. She's bored. Um, great, great vocal performance. Uh,
Hmm.
character design is sure that's what boredom looks like. I have not much to say because we don't really see the character. And then
And kind
anxiety.
of looks that they're off to the side, right?
Yeah,
Like, okay, like I don't care.
yeah. And then anxiety is frazzled, big eyes, sort of toothy grin, small.
Fiery hair.
The wily hair is perfect.
Mm.
Um, but I think one of the key elements of anxiety compared with a character like embarrassment, but also compared with a character like joy, is that she's kind of small in stature, which she's big in personality and big in voice, but small in size. And I think that's a really, really great representation of anxiety because some things can seem huge and overwhelming and dreadful, but they're really not going to be that bad. Like they're smaller than they appear.
Yeah.
So I think playing anxiety like that, where she's really, really loud and brash, but also not this, she doesn't grow to massive size during the tornado scene, even though she's taking over the mind. She's moving around like that, being frantic because that's all she can do. She's small, so she has to be in all these different places to try to accomplish everything, try to
Yeah.
tackle everything head on, when really she doesn't have the wherewithal, the capability. So I think 3 out of 4 really, really, really well designed, and then the fourth, eh,
Yeah. I agree with
not bad,
everything you
not
just
good.
said. I'm going to focus more on the colors of them.
Please
And
do.
by and large, the new characters are relatively muted colors compared to the five original ones, right? You've got red for anger, green for disgust, purple for fear, bright yellow, bubbly, whatever for joy, and then like a deep blue for sadness. But with the exception of anxiety, who's I think the most vibrant color of the four new ones, they're all kind of just like there. Ennui especially blends in with everything. Like, of course, right? Doesn't who cares? Um, you've got embarrassment, who's like this really sort of soft shade of pink, and sort of yeah, like fluffy, and it's like, and then envy is like this greenish teal, whatever. But I think that's a fascinating choice too, because you think about the five original emotions, think about them in the way that we understand them, is that those are going to be the most vibrant. They're the ones you go to, like, oh yeah, I'm happy, I've got joy, oh I'm angry, I'm sad. You, you know, that's yeah, sure. Someone can say I have anxiety, but no one's gonna be like, I have embarrassment or I have ennui. Like that, that's just it's a very stilted way
No,
of talking.
I'm bored, I'm
And
embarrassed,
yeah,
I'm anxious.
they're all sort of wrapped up in one. And it felt like the muted colors sort of captured everything else with the original ones too.
We're forgetting one. Nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. Nostalgia. Too
The
early.
old lady. It's too
Too
early,
early.
yes. But perhaps we've waited until long enough into the episode to address her. I just have one note: rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
She's looking back with rose-colored glasses. Nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
No
Yeah.
notes. Brilliant, brilliant.
That's perfect. Like
Kind of a
it
gag,
comes
but
out of
also
it
not
a
really.
gag. Yeah, it's a gag, but I loved it. It was perfect. And
And to
like
use it
kicking her out.
twice is
Oh no, you're too early. Yeah, I mean, look, overall, I think it's a strong entry. I think in some ways it's a stronger film than the first one. However, I think it loses that sort of creativity and uniqueness that the first one had.
Yeah,
But
it's
but
pretty good summary.
the complexities that go into this film and sort of the way that they weave together all of the emotions, especially at the end, once they're all fine and well and getting along and everything, is exactly what you'd expect. Because you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to live with anxiety and embarrassment and envy and nostalgia and all of it. You're going to have to deal with it along with being joyful. They're all going to have to work together. And so it'll be really interesting to see. I will put money on that they will make a third film. I know they're
Oh,
developing a series.
with the box office performance of this one,
Yeah,
absolutely. I would be surprised if we have to wait 9 years for the next one.
they've already announced a series about dreams based in the same universe. And
Disney Plus
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
makes sense.
But again, I think these kinds of films make emotion so accessible to kids. And I think we can't overlook the importance of that. Um, I don't want to get too political here, but we've dealt with a lot since especially 2020, but even before then, where conversations surrounding mental health and wellness and talking about these things and having conversations has become more mainstream. It's become more accepted, and I hope it continues to do so. It's too important to not have these discussions. It's too important not to check in on your friends. It's too important not to take care of yourself. Um, and these films kind of make it easy to like point, they make it easy to point to these emotions and like, that's it. I feel that right now. And I see it in these films, especially as a kid, right? Like, I think your point you made earlier about the movies being for parents too, it's a great one. It'll help them navigate, it'll help them be part of that support system that's so important. It shows them what their child is going through. And you know what? Hats off to Pixar for that, right? In no world would I have ever thought before, 2015 that this would be such a critical part of like an everyday life, right? Talking about mental health and everything. But here we are. And we have another film, a sequel that deals with the exact conversations that we're having right now through the eyes of a 13-year-old child. It's too, these conversations are too important to not have.
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said, it's essential to daily discourse, mental health, emotional well-being. This film makes it super accessible to quite literally all ages.
Mhm.
It's an important film. And I did not think, like you said, 10 years ago, I would have seen myself saying that. Um, Filmmaking perspective, again, like we said at the very, very beginning of the episode, it's a movie. It's not going to
Yeah.
be on either of our top five lists at the end of the year, but, or at least I'm speaking for myself there.
Mhm. Probably not.
But
But it
when
doesn't
you,
have to.
again, look under the hood,
Yeah.
you see something a little bit more significant than what this animated movie appears on the surface.
Yeah. It did exactly what I think it needed to do, which is continue this conversation and sort of further it and keep it accessible to people.
Mhm.
Because it didn't just stop with um, Joy being like learning her lesson in the first movie. She's gonna learn more. All gonna learn more, and it's great. Yeah.
We'll see you for Inside Out 3.
Next year.
Oh man, they
Yeah.
probably could.
Oof.
They're a Disney company. They probably could.
Well, I think that's all I got. I mean, go
Yeah, I'm
see
good.
this, right? I mean, it is definitely worth seeing. It is more than enjoyable for me. I think it is smart. It has its flaws, but you'll go to the theater and you'll enjoy it. Go take your kids if you have them.
Yeah, Hour and a half, good start of summer movie.
It's an easy hour and a half. It's not, you're not, it's not a slog at all.
You're in and out of the theater in 2 hours.
Yeah, it's
And
great.
stick around for the credit scene because it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll get back to you next week with a new episode and hopefully Ben too. We'll see how he's doing. Good night.
He's got a lot of emotions.
He does have a lot of emotions.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Good night.